So we're now going to be joined by Rebecca Upton, who's a postdoc researcher at Wrexham University and also a lecturer at the Centre for Alternative Technology, and by Luke Gooding, who's at the School for the Stockholm Environment Institute at York University, who is a researcher in community energy. And they have been working with Tracy and Emily as four researchers for the last year looking at permaculture. They've been to the office in Leeds and they've looked at our archives. They've done interviews with, I think, 30 different people, and they've held three different workshops using the Three Horizons framework. And they've really done a deep dive into the permaculture network as an example of a group that is working on ecological citizenship, being ecological citizens. So after a year of work, we're really very much looking forward to seeing what they found out. So without any further ado, I shall pass on to Rebecca and Luke. And if you need me to give you a 5-minute warning, I will, but you've got about 40 minutes. So over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Andy. Thanks for introductions as well. We will be making this interactive at some point. So I think Luke and I are going to chat for about 20 minutes or so. And then we're going to go into breakout rooms and then have a bit of reflection time from everyone. It'll be great to hear from you all. I'm Rebecca. Yeah, Tracy and Emily couldn't make it tonight, but they've been part of the team as well. And yeah, we're really excited to talk to you about what we've been up to in the last year, I think it's been. Just to note, just for Luke actually, when you do your half and we switch, I'll be clicking through for you. So you have to just say next slide, and I'll do that.
No problem.
If we look at the bottom bar on this slide, this project is about ecological citizenship, and it's with a few different universities. So the main university being Royal College of Art, but it's also with Wrexham University, and Luke is at University of York. And we're funded by the Engineering and Physical Science Research Council. The project's been going on for 4 years, and we're in towards the end of the third year now. And doing lots of different specifically funding. So it's a Research Plus project. I won't go into too much detail, but there's a website a website link at the end of these slides, so you can have a little look about other stuff we're doing. But we've been funding lots of different projects in the last couple of years, focusing on what ecological citizenship means for a sustainable digital transition in society. So yeah, if it's something that interests you, have a look and get in touch if you want to learn a bit more, because there's lots of other stuff we've been up to. If I go to the next slide. So we've, in the last year, I think it's been working with Permaculture Association. It's been, a fantastic opportunity to use sort of the insights and understanding that we have around ecological citizenship and bring it to all of the knowledge and wisdom of the Permaculture Association, to see how we can learn from each other, and how we can support with the big transition that permaculture is in at the moment into sort of future steps, be that in your individual spaces in permaculture, because everyone's doing so many different fantastic things, as well as the organisation in itself. So we've done lots of different things, including interviews, and scoping out lots of data from the last 40 or so years, the Permaculture Association, as well as these featuring workshops. So anyone who came to the Wales Permaculture Festival, my colleague Tracy and we did do a presentation then, so some of you might have heard a little bit of this before, but today we're just going to talk about the featuring workshops, which is basically us presenting back the insights that you've given us as an organisation. So as we're going through this, I think we will have a bit of time to reflect in our little breakout rooms. But maybe if you can spend time thinking about what pops out for you, or what you're seeing on these slides, which is the results of the futuring research, how it connects to you, how it connects to sort of where you're at the moment, and maybe your transitions going forward with the organisation. maybe in your local area, or maybe for the work you do. And that'll be really great to hear from everyone at the end. Okay, so we did these featuring workshops, and we did three. We did one in Leeds, one in Lampeter, and one was online. So maybe some of you joined us for that online session and can remember doing that using Miro boards, and it was all it was all very creative. And the idea of it is to look at three different horizons. I think it's on the next slide, actually. Yeah, I'll go into detail a bit further. On three different horizons to explore and consider the future. So we'll be presenting key insights that we've come up with that reflects on what you presented to us. And from this, we've developed next steps and potential experimentations that you can use to take the suggestions forward as an organisation. So just to reflect on where we're at the moment, well, where you at, where the Permaculture Association has been the last 40 years. It's a real moment in time. I'm sure a lot of people are feeling it in lots of different ways with accelerating climate, social and economic disruption. COP30 is happening at the moment, which always brings up a feeling of that change and transition and potential. And the Permaculture Association, we're aware has been, been doing amazing things for so long, but at the moment is quite stretched and has lots of incredible ideas. It's been amazing talking to so many people, and we hope this can help support that transition going forward. So in the last year, there's been a lot of focus on more moving beyond the short-term problem solving and bringing the connection between the past with permaculture's amazing history of over 40 years, global organization as well. And then we're using the tools that we've been exploring to critique and imagine with you. And sort of looking at your strategy as well. So we're aligning these imaginations and processes with your strategy development. So this is one of the research things that we did. It's a futuring tool. So maybe some of you know of it, or you heard of it. A lot of organizations are starting to use it now, but you can see in the graph at the top, it's sort of showing a sort of visual image of what we're looking at. So there's three horizons there. We've got 1, 2, 3, the red, the blue, and the green. And along the top axis, we've got the pattern, and then on the bottom is time. So horizon 1 is the current system. So you could call it business as usual, things going on as is, and often a lot of graphs are showing sort of that downward transition. The zone 2, so the blue one in the middle, is about transition, and this is where we're talking about innovations and emergence and new things, and potentially involves tensions as well. And then horizon 3 is more imaginative and transformative. But the importance is bringing all of those together. So we're not saying that one is better than the other, but it's really important to be able to look back and look forward and see sort of where we're at and how innovations can help with a transformative future. So here's some pictures. Maybe some of you were there. The top left, that was in Lampeter, the Futuring workshop. We had big bits of paper with that same graph. And we had loads of post-it notes. It was, really fabulous day. The top left and bottom left, both in Lampeter and then in Leeds as well. So two very different spaces and groups. And it was, really exciting and innovative day, and good to sort of close in and think about sort of transitioning and have fun with lots of colourful post-it notes. Okay, so just to reflect on the key headlines. So in Horizon 1, which is the current system, just to remind you all, which is business as usual. So the key themes that came up initially was about deep commitment and visible strain. So a lot of people, this is reflecting back what came out from the research. So that deep commitment, but also strain. So those in the Permaculture Association really were engaged and wanted to keep pushing with the transition and change, but felt that they were coming up against a lot of barriers. Which then linked to fragmentation. So we were often seeing there was lots of amazing things going on, but sometimes not that connection and relationship between, which sometimes led to burnout. And then there was also a focus on sort of the narrative not always being very clear and accessible. I know a lot of work has been done in this space, but it was a key thing that popped up in a lot of discussions that we had with you all. A lot of reliance on unpaid labour, which is great in itself. Like voluntary engagement is fantastic, but there is a lot of limits to it, particularly in relation to inclusion, and this is where things like burnout can happen. But within this, there's a really strong desire for belonging, community, place, be that within your smaller communities, people you see day to day, but also everyone you can see now online, and the real focus on cultural regeneration as well. So there's a lot of drive and commitment shown. So this theme focuses more on emotional and cultural tone. So again, we're talking about the current system. There's this huge grief for ecological and community loss, which is a real key driver for a lot of the Permaculture Association. That real strong longing to be of the land and with the land. Again, that came up as a really key theme, cut across a lot of the different research spaces we were in. The narrative is not always clear and accessible. That links back to the last one as well. So that came up quite a lot, the importance of making that. For example, I'm sure a lot of you have heard this personally, the discussion around the Permaculture Association's name in itself and whether that needs looking at potentially. There's also a need for relational infrastructure, ritual play, and celebration. So there was a lot of recognition. I think it's so much hard work, but so much recognition that it's really important to engage in communities and celebrate together. And there was a real focus on wellness being a collective experience and not an individual experience, which really pushes against the norms that we see today in society. Okay, so education particular, that was a real key theme that came up across all of the different research spaces. So there was a reflection on schooling being very much standardized and disconnected from community realities. So a lot of stuff Permaculture Association is doing is really butting up against what formal school systems are engaging with at the moment. There was a drive for the importance of ethical learning and embodied practices and bringing that into the learning experience, as well as reflecting on lifelong learning and intentional unlearning as well. These were two really key things that came up. And when Permaculture Association is working against a bigger system that is very far from what you're doing, it's a real complex space to be in. Zone of transition. So now we've gone back. So that the red zone, zone 1, that's the business as usual. So things that are happening at the moment. And now we're talking about those innovations, the emergence, the change. So these are the ideas that all the different groups that we did this featuring research with came up with. But they're quite innovative, and sometimes they created a bit of tension. So there might have been agreement, or maybe there was some disagreements within the group. So this one is a focus on what is emerging. So there's a drive for more land centres and school gardens. So it's connecting to formal education systems. Real importance of engaging with place-based projects. There's a real drive for accreditation and informal pathways taking forward, and the sort of regional skill sharing. So even between very close spaces, there often isn't that sharing and development. But I mean, obviously, we recognise that there needs time and capacity to do so. But it's really exciting hearing that there's a drive for that. There was also discussion around trauma-informed organising, food sovereignty, youth-led governance. So lots of different innovative ways of shaking things up or looking at the organisation with different eyes to take things forward. And then the next one, again, we're on Horizon 2. So that innovations section is about characteristics. So the first one is small in scale, but big in spirit. And that was something we felt from everyone that we met. It's very much mycelial, so lots of nodes, but not always connected. So we really recognized that that felt like a loss to a lot of people. And the need to differentiate I didn't go into details of this, but there's particular innovations that are more focused on transformative transitions and imagination, and those that can potentially go backwards as well. So it's sort of recognizing and the importance of that, the tension. And then finally, storytelling and knowledge stewarding are really essential. So there was recognition of the importance of bringing storytelling into permaculture design. I think I'll pass over to Luke now. Is that right?
Yeah, lovely. Thank you, Rebecca. So when we're talking now about Horizon 3, which is this final horizon, which is the future, we want to see this transformative future. We see that obviously at the start of our graph starts very low, right? Because at that point we don't know what we're aiming for yet. And then when we devise what we're aiming for and then put energy and resources behind that, we see that on our 3 horizons graph grow very nicely and quite in a uniform manner, up and out. So what did we get? What did you say to us? What did the people who we talked to say to us? We had a few things that come out. Firstly, I mean, I suppose everyone on this call will agree, it would be wonderful and incredible for permaculture to be embedded in daily life. It's not marginal. It is part of mainstream education. It's part of normal conversations. It's part of what people do with their everyday schedule. And it reaches people's homes. It reaches people's work. It reaches people's places of leisure. That was the key that's the future we want. And so that was the key kind of master transformative future. But within that, what are we actually going to do? Well, actually, it's about maybe the governance of it is particularly participatory. More voices, as Rebecca says, youth voices perhaps, voices of more vulnerable groups, voices of just a wider range of people from different backgrounds in different places. Would that enable us to have that view of permaculture embedded in everyday life? Also, is that transformative future about systems thinking? Do we need to be looking at, economics as well as the environment? How can we make our positive impact on the economic system as well? Because obviously that needs a lot of help to be better. It doesn't need much help to be bad, but it needs a lot of help to be better. So how can we, with our energy, enter into that space? How could we also enter into a wider space, talking to organisations, local authorities, national government, for instance, or local businesses, local cooperatives? But also potentially this is about getting involved in other areas, not just food, but is it about housing? Is it about energy? Is it about what actually we touch every day and interact with every day? Thank you, Rebecca. Next slide, please. That felt very Chris Whitty saying next slide, please. Also, a lot came out about this idea of our own personal ways of being in this. And a reflection that hit me from quite a few people was this idea about gross domestic care and giving a service to life. And that idea that success isn't about fame, it's not about individual achievement, wealth, or status necessarily, although it obviously is for many people. But what if success was more about contributions that support life, contributions that support biodiversity, communities, mutual aid, education, caregiving? Are they not what success should be a measure of, and how can we stitch in different ways of measuring success that isn't just monetary. And I would argue there's a whole ream of potential things that we could stitch in as to actually how are we measuring success. And the participants came up with some wonderful ideas. I'll show a screenshot of some of the ideas that came up. I fear it may be too small font because there's that many on here, but hopefully we can get some. But also there was this idea about celebration. How can we look towards a culture that we're not overworked and we aren't just consuming all the time? We're reclaiming that time for things such as repair, mending objects, mending ecosystem, mending relationships. And what if we also had a culture of play, like creativity, well-being, learning, getting in contact with our inner child, have that thirst for learning? Would that not be part of how this transformative future could be? But also, as Rebecca mentioned as well, what about celebration? These community rituals. I mean, we all gathered together in June for the campfire, where we also held one of our online sessions. That kind of community coming together around a regular thing or a regular time or regular theme. What can that deliver? That collective joy, and is it showing the value of slow, meaningful, communal ways of living? And that was really something that came through as well. But also, we've got damage. Society and ecosystems are being damaged from various forces, potentially presently now more than ever. And how can we work towards healing those emotional and ecological wounds, as it were? And we can't do that alone. That is a collective action. So how can we get, some sort of feeling around that collective trauma, and then also have that civic kind of duty to tackle that? And it's not, obviously, we don't want it to be a private burden because it's too much for anybody, but how can we come together around that in a healthy way? Thank you, Rebecca. Next slide, please. But also, in terms of the association itself, these are some of the things that came out too, that actually, is it the fact that it's not a central body that, we all come to an AGM, which the AGM is wonderful, obviously, but is it also about the fact that it is the mucus of the soil, as it were? It's everything between the particles of the soil and that mycelial steward. Is it about having that richness of being amongst everything, but not necessarily a central node point, and how it can be very distributed in that way? And there was also this idea that the association has that role of, could it be uplifting and further uplifting kind of those storytellers and knowledge stewards, of which there's such a wealth of knowledge and expertise in the association, how to further lift, how to further kind of get those voices heard in wider audiences, and indeed audiences that maybe haven't heard it before, just because they're in such a different, different realm. But also, we've had a wonderful time as a team getting involved in the amazing archive that the association's got, and that should not be diminished anyway, because it's an incredible resource. So actually, is the transformative future making sure that all that knowledge which is in the archives and that memory, that organizational memory, how can we make sure that even more gets amplified? And I know there's been great work by archivists taking place already with those documents. How can we make sure that is even more made accessible to as many people who will read it, essentially, not just people who are in the association, but more people too. And also this idea that because it's a lovely distributed network of amazing people, how can we make sure that all the learnings of all those people get shared really nicely so everybody else has potential access to all of those? And I know lots of things, all these things are happening, but we're talking about amplifying and doing even more. How can we make that happen? Rebecca, next slide, please. So the font, I fear, is too small on this, but this was our campfire session, which was on June the 10th of this year, where we had an amazing group of people, and I think at least some people on the call I recognised that were there on that evening. And these were some of the things that came out of our 3 horizons. So we had people plotting what they thought was in Horizon 1, 2, and 3. And all of those have kind of fed into what we've communicated back to you this evening. I, for one, have been really impressed by the amount of things that have came out, and lots of things that I didn't expect. People, talking about their projects were showing how they had a business model where they could deliver something that maybe they hadn't thought of before, or people saying, actually, we're working with healthcare and they hadn't thought of that before. So lots of these wonderful new ways of thinking. I'll just move on to the next slide, because the next slide might have a bit bigger font. Lovely, thank you. So when we plotted those ideas onto our Horizon 1, 2, and 3, that's what came out as. So as you can see, a nice spread of things that people, the issues in the red that are happening that we'd like to taper down. All those things from obviously pollution or society pressures. We'd like to see those reduced. But also in Horizon 2, what about if we had some of those innovations where hope is a norm thing that we feel, and how that could come up? And also the fact that, for instance, say libraries have more of a role in communities, and people have more access to libraries, and people feel more welcomed in libraries, how that would be a societal innovation that could go up. And then that would leave us with Horizon 3, where we get things like people feel like they have access to long-term education for free, or people feel like they have secure food and energy supply. That all of these things could lead into that Horizon 3. This is also, I will say, because I'm aware that the font is terribly small, this is also going in a separate report as well. So that will be on a PDF and made available to make sure that you can pick out anything that you want to pick out, or even relay back to us. That would be wonderful. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this sounds very strategic implications. Sounds a bit serious, doesn't it? But these are some of the things that I think we could be looking at in terms of what it all means. So we've had all this amazing information relayed to us, and we've hopefully kind of noted it all down in a really accurate way. But what does it actually mean? So from my perspective, I think it's leaning into that connective, transformative role, firstly, and move from potentially what some people might see as a service, which is in its a membership organization, move from that to actually being that network steward and create those conditions for even further learning and visibility. And I think some of the things that came out particularly surrounded these 4 points about these 4 leverage areas, of which obviously they're already happening in spades, but potentially could happen even more. Obviously, education, the networks, policy, and culture. And I feel like lots of what we were told surrounds those 4, and elements of those could all play a role in a possible future. So next slide, please. I'll go into a few of what that could look like in practice. So these are some of the proposed actions. This was kind of our innovations, our H2. What do we actually get told would be a nice thing that people had as action? So storytelling initiatives, all the great projects that you're hosting, you're carrying out, you're putting energy into, how to amplify those with better stories, those transformations of place, of people, of communities. Also, that element of digital access. I know we're not all blessed to have great Wi-Fi. We live in places which don't have great Wi-Fi, for instance, and we don't always have the opportunity to just hop on a call and talk to somebody on the other side of the country. So how can we improve those communication and digital access, maybe making things really low gigabytes, megabytes, to making sure that they're really low and you can, open them as you would on a Kindle or something that's really low data, so people with maybe minimal access, minimal internet can get access to them. But also, is there a role here for some thematic working groups? Because I know some people have different passions to other people. So particular people have passions about working with youth, particular passions about maybe they've got great relationships with local authorities or local government. Or what about also passions about people who work in the education system, work in schools, for instance? And how could those groups of people perhaps have even more emphasis on that and have that thematic working group? Also, this idea about looking after ourselves, and we've mentioned this well-being. How can we be more looking after our well-being? How can we focus on that more? And also just reaffirming that commitment to inclusion, that all people are welcome. And I know the organisation does that amazingly, but just front and centre that was some of the things that came out. Some of the longer term proposed actions which came out, which I thought were fascinating, is this idea that it could be foundational civic way of being. And that could be, actually mainstream education, could be how local government actually think of systems, how national government think of systems, to have it as that foundational civic ethic and value system. And also, what about stewarding a learning commons? I've mentioned about the archive. What about even having more of that and actually having that as a commons which is accessible for all and promoted to all, with no ownership over any of the information. It is just welcome. Please come and learn and read and understand what you'd like to understand from it. But also people suggested it should be a cultural reference point, and this idea that it could be post-growth, and by that we mean obviously that we get to a point where potentially capitalism doesn't have such of a damaging role as it does at the moment in our ecosystems, and how it could be having a role in that potential long-term future. Next slide, please. And maybe some experiments, because all of this is wonderful to say, but until we put it in action, we don't know which things will work best and where and with whom and how. So there's also this idea that we had some people suggesting experiments. What things could we just have a go at, maybe pilot something and just see how it worked and see what people thought of it. So things like story circles or Pathfinder permaculture in schools, or bioregional hub pilots. And I know that some of these things have been done maybe in different guises or in different places, but maybe having a different think about those experiments. And obviously we talked about the Horizon 2 Innovation Lab. What about having that as an actual kind of like place where people come together and say, I've got an idea for an innovation, and it's quickly worked up into something and tried on a small scale. And if it fails, we learn something. If it doesn't fail, we learn something. And what about people who are actually kind of put in place with a hat on, which is a justice and inclusion hat? How can that person safeguard to make sure that as many people from different backgrounds as possible having access to this great knowledge? And also, I know it's a difficult thing with limited funds, but that kind of idea about public messaging as well. Lots of the wonderful things that came out have amazing implications for people outside of the Permaculture Association, how to make sure we get that message out there and what that campaign could look like. Next slide, please. I think I've talked maybe a little bit longer, so it's just the last slide, Rebecca, and then we can make sure we have some time for reflection. I think it might be. Lovely. Right, I'll just quickly go over these. Thank you. So I think all that being said, we have to be kind to ourselves. As we've got to be kind to the earth, we've got to be kind to ourselves. So we need to make sure that all of these practices that we're saying about, caring for ecosystems, caring for society, we also make sure we need to internally care for who we are, both as an organisation, as a people. And I think that definitely means, spaces of safety and spaces where people feel like they can have time for themselves. And I know the organisation is doing this already with members and staff, but also how to do that more and make a bigger deal out of it, that it is good practice to share with other organisations, to be like, no, actually, this is an amazing thing to do. And people aren't on this planet to work their whole lives. They're on this planet to be who they are and make sure that they care for each other. Next slide, please. So what I would say is this isn't a full stop. This is a comma. And actually, this is only kind of, I'll speak for myself. Last year, I've been involved with working with Permaculture Association. It's been incredible. So it's not something that it's going to be a long-term collaboration if you'll have me. So it's also about this idea about balancing what we maintain, what we grow, what we let go. And that isn't for any but one person to obviously decide. It is for collective decisions about what particular emphasis should happen where and with whom and how. And I would also say that this idea that it's potentially in a space for stories and a space for people to have a go and an experiment and maybe suggesting, I fancy trying this particular innovation because this is my passion. I think that's a really interesting place to be. We have a place where we have, a climate crisis which is rapidly advancing. What if we also rapidly looked at how we could innovate in different areas that we are already doing so, but maybe expand or try different things? So yes, also an invitation, a very warm invitation to anybody who wants to take part in that next chapter and what that could look like. Thank you. Next slide. So we're going to do some breakout rooms again. Particularly, I'd love for people to kind of have a think about these 4 things. What myself and Rebecca have said, what kind of resonates with you? What do you think, yeah, bang on? Or what do you think, no, that's not right, that's off? What's missing? What could, be a priority for you? Like, actually, no, that thing that you said, that's definitely number 1 for me that I would start doing tomorrow. Or what could you actually say, no, we're doing that already, and you could actually just plug it in there, or you could do that with what's not an easy win, but something that already that could fit quite well. So those 4 things would be great if you could have a discussion around. I don't know if Charlie, you can send us off, or if anyone's got any questions before we go off. If not, click the button to join your room.
Sorry, we probably ended up cutting conversations short, so really sorry about that. But we just wanted to sort of reflect on where we're at, and we hope that you'll find some space going forward with yourself, maybe, or with other groups around you, or with those that you're connected to around the world, to reflect on these questions. If anyone wants to get in contact with us, I'll put the email address on the chat. We need to wrap up now, so thank you so much for letting us, spend time with the organisation and hear from a lot of people. It's been such a fantastic year. We've learned a lot, and we're so inspired by you all. And we hope that the synthesis of what we've gathered together can help take things forward to you for an exciting future. And maybe if anyone would like to share something, please pop it into the chat.
Yeah.
That'll be great. And yeah, we'll just pass to Luke to say farewells as well, and then we'll hand back to
Yeah, no, apologies. I probably spoke for too long. I was getting that into it. Thank you all for listening and for taking part in all the stages. And yeah, looking forward to future steps with yourselves. Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you, everyone. So, yep. Thanks, Rebecca. Thanks, Luke. Great presentation. We've got, I think, 3 or 4 academic papers coming out, peer-reviewed papers, talking about the education work for governance. So we've got more coming. There'll be more opportunities for everyone to contribute and to respond to what we've been learning with Ecological Citizens Network. If you did have any thoughts in those breakout groups or any responses, then please do add them into the chat, and we will create other opportunities for you to feed in, as we always do.